From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis and Josh Nelson.
Everyone, welcome to a new Sox Machine Live. I am Josh Nelson alongside Jim Margulis, the managing editor of SoxMachine.com. It's a lovely Thursday night, August 3rd, 2023. It's beautiful weather outside of Chicago, and some of you have decided to watch us instead. We appreciate you guys joining us as we are currently live streaming. And for the podcast listeners, thank you guys for listening to the audio version after the live stream, which we stream live on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/SoxMachine. And Jim, there's quite a bit to discuss in this episode. We're going to talk about Jake Burger and how that trade came to be. We got some wonderful insight from Miami. We got some bad news. Liam Hendriks is going to be out again for a very long time. The White Sox got swept at Texas, but don't worry, a culture's being built. And at the end of the episode, we'll preview the upcoming weekend series as the White Sox face the Cleveland Guardians. But before we get started, Jim, I want to know, since tomorrow is a big lottery day, the Mega Millions jackpot is over $1 billion. So Jim Margulis, if you were to win, how would you spend $1.25 billion?
Well, we could try to save the subject that we're trying to, write here, the ship we're trying to write. I think it was John Heyman who talked to Jerry Reinsdorf and said, are you interested in selling? And Reinsdorf responded with, make me an offer. And so, we could actually maybe do that. At least buy a sizable chunk, but that's basically how that money is incomprehensible to me. I remember one time I was working at my former job. It was paper owned by the Hearst Corporation, and the publisher was an actual Hearst. And the Powerball is happening in the office. Everybody bought a Powerball when our department was set to have lunch with them. And I realized, we were talking about what we do with Powerball winnings, and realizing, oh, this is pocket change for him. This is this has to be the most boring conversation in the world to him. Oh, how would you spend $200 million? I don't know. How did he do that last year? So I always think of that.
Yeah, I think how would I spend it? Well, what they say, happy wife, happy life. So Kim would love to get a house in New Orleans because that's her favorite place in the world. So I think I'd buy her a house where all the other fancy houses that people live, where the Mannings grew up, etc., in that part of New Orleans.
Not the House of the Rising Sun.
Yeah, I would probably get a condo in San Diego. So that way in the winter time, I don't have to spend it in Chicago. I could just spend the winters in San Diego. I don't know what the real estate market is in Arizona. See, here I'm just thinking of all the houses that I'm going to buy and never spend any time in them. So I'm with you. It'd be insane. Just how much money that would be. Sox Machine would be well funded. I would say that.
Yeah, we'd basically just travel a lot more. Just set up our own press row somewhere, buying all the tickets. Here's our press box. It's a suite right below home plate.
That'd be awesome. That would be so baller. Oh, we can't get a press pass. This team will credential us. No worry, we'll just buy a suite. That would be awesome. Love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments section on how you would spend $1.25 billion. But buying the White Sox, let's say after taxes, you get $700 million. You call Michael Jordan and be like, hey, I'm willing to add in $500 million. If you're willing to front some more of it, I think that could be the direction how you could own the White Sox. But yeah, tomorrow night, the drawing before 9 p.m. Central Time, a plug for whatever state you live in lottery, the Mega Millions, $1.25 billion. And I'd just be happy if I got 3 numbers. We got this comment, as in rec, so many sell the team Jerry billboards. That's a good one. Oh, man. And Tim Maher down in Arizona, I brought that up, is hashtag 109ing today, as in 109 flipping degrees.
I've wondered, I haven't seen a story, but I'd be curious about the like Arizona Complex League. Like you look at the game time temperatures, like 112 degrees, 115. Like, does it get too hot to play, or like how do they manage that? Because like we're used to spring in Arizona Fall League where the temperatures are more reasonable, but having seen like the stories about record heat and like record number of 100-degree days over and over again, the record number of like 90-degree lows, like it would seem like there's got to be a point where it gets too hot to baseball.
Yeah, Will Carroll, who is the injury expert, he has a newsletter that I subscribe to, and he wrote about that specific topic.
Okay.
In his newsletter today. I'll forward you that because it was quite interesting in how baseball is trying to combat this, and just Arizona as a state overall with so many high school and college athletics are trying new methods in case if athletes are about to suffer heat stroke. So I'll definitely forward it to you. A lot of that stuff is way out of my league, so I have to like read it like 3 times to really comprehend and on the methods and what makes sense. But yeah, now that you mention it, that is a pretty interesting topic, and I just read about it, so I'll forward that to you because that is something that Arizona is trying to address right now, and obviously this becomes a Major League Baseball issue. But when it comes to injuries and such, I don't know if I trust the White Sox. We'll get to that in a moment. But let's talk about Jake Burger real quick. As how did the Jake Burger trade happen? We got some insight from Miami, as their general manager Kim Ng was able to join the TV broadcast. And for the podcast listeners, here's the audio. And for those that are watching a live stream, here is the feed from the Miami Marlins YouTube channel.
You know, we probably had a handful of deals that that we thought were there or close to being there. But we really felt that we had to get one locked in. So at that point, we decided to go with Mr. Berger. Called Kenny Williams, got that one done in the books.
Not too many deals between the Marlins and White Sox over the years I saw.
Not too many, but considering I'm an alumni
yeah, that's right. That's where it all started.
Had a pretty good relationship with Kenny. And then I will say the last 15 minutes were pretty frenetic because you're trying to lock down what you can, and really, you know, it really gets down to crunch time where you really need to figure out what's real and what's not.
Good insight from a Major League Baseball general manager and just how crazy the trade deadline is. But the former front office employee shares some great insight on how the Jake Burger trade happened, Jim. And there's a lot of people patting the back of Rick Hahn. Hey, you got Jake Eater. That's a good exchange. Oh, wait. It wasn't Rick Hahn. It was Kenny Williams speaking to his former intern who became employee of the Chicago White Sox. And I find this fascinating because it brings a question that we've been asking for years now. It's becoming one of our favorite mini games. Jim Margulis, who is in charge?
People complain about Kenny Williams not doing anything, and then he does something, and people complain about that. I don't get it. He can't win. It's like this one didn't concern me the way it concerned others, just because they do go way back. Like, you know, Williams was in the minor league development department for the White Sox around the time that Kim Ng was working and handling arbitration cases with the White Sox. So they were, you know, and they were colleagues and coworkers. And like, it would seem to me that, you know, if you're making a ton of calls at the same time, it makes sense to like, yeah, probably divide and conquer a little bit and say like, you know, who, you know, you used to talking to her, or you're used to talking to him, or you have his number, or you know how to reach him, or like, you know how to get through, or you had this talk, you know, pick up where you left off and get it done. So I imagine like this one doesn't concern me. If like it were Rick Hahn talking to like Jed Hoyer or just, you know, Chris Antonetti or somebody like who may not really have a direct overlap with, or may, you know, be different generation of GM, what have you, like the you know, GMs in Minnesota. I forget the portmanteau that they use to cover both of them. Like I could see a case where, yeah, it just makes sense that if they were colleagues and they're used to talking to each other, then great, you know, share the same language. So that really didn't bother me too much as I saw like the alarm flags going off of who's in charge. But I mean, like Kenny's still Rick's boss.
Right.
So, I mean, like, and the way these tags, like, you know, when Jed Hoyer was the general manager, but Theo Epstein was the team president, and everybody said Theo still did everything. Like, yeah, I mean, the division of labor is unclear, but this is, I think, part of just title inflation in baseball and not having like a business guy and a baseball guy in the White Sox organization that, yeah, there will probably be some times where they both are talking baseball and getting deals done. I mean, they've been working together for, as Rick Hahn would say, 20 odd years. He can't even, you know, keep track of how long he's worked there. So yeah, it doesn't alarm me just because this is probably the way it's done for a lot of frenetic periods of activity. And yeah, it just happens to be that Kim Ng name checked Kenny specifically instead of like the White Sox or Rick Hahn.
Yeah, I like your logical approach, Jim, but this is the Chicago White Sox, and other things have come to light in recent days to suggest that it may not be that smooth.
Mm-hmm.
I see a situation where Rick always has to check in with Kenny with his trades before it finalizes, in some situations where Kenny does not need to check in with Rick. Like, I'm your boss. If Kim calls me and I feel like this is a fair deal based on the film that I quickly watch, and because I have that type of baseball acumen, and Rick, you do not, I can pull the trigger on this trade without your approval. Like, I don't need your buy-in because I'm your boss, and I think this is the best direction for us to trade Jake Berger for Jake Eater. Where if Rick is trying to make moves like with the Angels and the Dodgers, he may need like Kenny's approval, where Kenny doesn't feel comfortable approving it until he goes and watches film of the guys that the White Sox are trying to acquire, and then goes back to Rick and says, okay, you can go ahead and make the deal. Like that, I can see that being very likely as far as the working relationship that clearly does not work. It is clearly not producing results. But I do find this kind of funny here because there is a lot of back patting. Like, you know what, Rick Hahn, you made a great deal, a tough decision. You traded Jake Berger. No, he didn't. It was Kenny that decided to make that tough decision.
Well, you know, the thing that struck me is that, you know, I guess, you know, who knows if it'll come up if somebody asks Rick or Kenny about what Kim Ng said about who she talked to and who's actually in charge. But like, it did strike me that, this is a move the White Sox made to trade somebody who did not need to be traded. Like, you know, Lucas Giolito needed to be moved.
Right.
Lance Lynn needed to be moved. Joe Kelly needed to be moved. Like, those have been the players Rick Hahn has traded. Like, Nick Madrigal was the only one who didn't have to be traded of this recent bout of activity, but like he was injured at the time, so it kind of counts in terms of like if they're giving up on him, like there was a pressure to deal him. But everybody else has basically been moved because of either 40-man roster considerations or out of options considerations. So like there's always been a pressure making Rick Hahn or making the White Sox trades happen. This is the first trade I can remember in a while to where like Jake Berger did not have to be moved. Like, I think it's like I mentioned, it's in our deadline show. Like, I think it's a risky deal for both sides, or like it's uncertain what each side's getting. So it's fascinating. I'm looking forward to seeing how it unfolds. But like, this is a case where like you had a bunch of right-handed slugger types who with very, you know, limited defensive utility, and somebody has to be moved. And maybe Kenny's saying like, I'll hold my nose and do it. Or like, you know, I'll make the call. I'll pull the trigger. This is what I'm used to doing. I'm used to trading Aaron Rowand, and I'm used to trading, you know, Brandon McCarthy and guys who are, you know, could contribute to other teams, but I want to move them for somebody who can use more now. Like if it takes like, you know, that kind of teamwork, you know, one guy willing to just pull the trigger on somebody who might hurt them down the road versus, you know, leaving Rick Hahn to trade the guys who need to be traded. Like, at least action happened. So in that regard, like, yeah, the results are positive. And I think even the Berger trade, like, could blow up in the White Sox faces, but they needed to make some kind of move to alleviate that logjam on the roster. I just, you know, every time you talk about praising the White Sox, though, or praising their deadline activity, it feels like a praise for the current model of management and like support for them continued employment. And like, no. So that's why I really don't like talking about this, because like they would have been fired so many times already. And they're not.
Oh, I love it because it's a great segue. But we got this comment from Azad Rec on YouTube. Hana La Russa hire, quote, it was a collaborative decision, end quote. The hell it was. As we learned. Oh, that's why I
Jerry said you're going to have to, and I said yes.
Collaboration, of course. Oh man. Okay. Well, at least I could laugh because this next news is not great. We learned yesterday, and Jim wrote about it on SoxMachine.com, that Liam Hendriks is out 12 to 14 months as he needed Tommy John surgery. And let's break this down real quick. So there's a couple of quotes that Jim pointed out in the Sox Machine column. If you didn't get a chance to read it, I highly recommend to do so. So first, let's pull the Rick Hahn quote. When talking about the rehab process for Liam Hendriks, Rick Hahn said, quote, perhaps the most thoroughly vetted return to play of any player in certainly my memory, end quote, from Rick Hahn. And Jim, great research by you. You pulled out this quote back in June 14th from Liam Hendriks. And when Hendriks was asked about his injury, he said, quote, it's been sore for the last few weeks, ever since before my rehab assignment. It was barking, but my mantra is to pitch things until I can. It kept getting a little worse and worse and worse until the last couple of outings I wasn't able to pitch through that pain. That's what Hendriks said on June 14th. And on August 2nd, Liam Hendriks is out 12 to 14 months because of Tommy John surgery. And looking up his past spring training numbers, and I did this because I was curious in like how many innings did Hendriks need in spring training to get ready for the regular season. And of course he had normal off season. He could do all his conditioning like he always does in the winter time, arrives in Glendale, maybe doesn't pitch at the very beginning, but he pitches definitely in the March games leading up to the regular season. And in 2021, he just needed 5 innings. In 2022, he pitched 5 2/3 innings. He didn't have spring training this year because he survived cancer. So not a normal off season. And in his rehab starts in Charlotte, he appeared in 6 games. And guess what? He pitched 5 innings. And going back to that quote again from Liam Hendriks, it's been sore for the last few weeks. Ever since before my rehab assignment, it was barking. I got questions. And one of the questions is, did Liam report that his bicep or his pitching arm was barking to the training staff? And what did the training staff do with that information? Because to your point, what you wrote in the column, Jim, these things are not meshing well. And now the outcome of possibly rushing someone back too soon is that they're going to miss the entire 2024 season. And now you have a contract decision that is needed to be made after the World Series, in which you either have to pick up the $15 million option, knowing that the chances are very high that Hendriks is not going to pitch for you, or you buy out Hendriks and he gets $1.5 million from the White Sox over the next 10 seasons, but he is a free agent and he is, I assume, on his own when it comes to rehabbing from Tommy John. But I think the White Sox could always make their facilities available to Hendriks if he needed to use them to get back on track. So that's what they have done for themselves here. And my biggest takeaway, Jim, is, again, fire everyone. But this, the White Sox have always been struggling with this. They continue to struggle with as far as player rehab and handling of injuries to their players. And boy, this really has blown up. And this was like the worst case scenario. This was the biggest fear, and it happened.
Yeah. And, there's a comment in the YouTube stream about like, how much of that was Liam rushing himself back versus, the organization mishandling him. And it could be both. Like, it could be a case. I mentioned this on 670 The Score when I was on, saying like, was Liam Hendriks trying to be superhuman when really he's human and his body just absorbed so much wear and tear over the course of the lymphoma battle that just, perhaps he thought he was pitching through normal pain, and maybe he just couldn't quite tell what normal pain was based on just everything he had to go through. And so maybe he misjudged an arm situation that he's used to managing, because his UCL has been partially torn for 15 years. James Fegan reported that back during trying to figure out how long he'd been compromised for when it came to, not only the lymphoma, but also going back to last year when he was frustrated by like how he wasn't able to pitch as long as he normally did, and he had the flexor strain and whatnot. So he's had known arm issues for a while, and so like it's a case where like, hey, he's used to pitching through a certain amount of discomfort and rallying, and so like, that could be a case where Hendriks just misjudged, or maybe just bad luck because he's 34 and he's been pitching with a partially torn UCL for 15 years, and maybe just happened to be normal pain that turned into abnormal pain like this time around. And this was when the bill had to be paid. But just, it is White Sox, luck, not necessarily bad luck. Maybe they make their own luck here when they, Rick Hahn says that it's the most thoroughly vetted return. And then like, Hendriks goes and says like, yeah, my arm's been hurting the whole time. Like, did the vetting include asking him? And, I'm guessing it did, but just, if Hendriks is saying like, yeah, it's normal, I'm making all my appearances the way I normally do, and it's not going away. But like it does smack a little bit of hubris a little bit, even if I do think the White Sox probably had best, safest intentions in mind, just because like, this is terrible press to have one of the best stories, an SB winning story for Hendriks's courage and resolve and resilience and getting back on the mound, and the reception he got in minor league dugouts and major league dugouts and the crowd and everywhere he went. Like, it is a great story. So if you're the White Sox, and I do believe this is the case, like, that they wouldn't want to just milk it and be like, hey, story's going to, this season's going belly up. Let's use Liam as a shield to hide behind and like have a few positive weeks of press. Like, I don't think they're that callous. I think it's more a matter of just, I'm going to, say that they have some level of humanity here. I think it's it strikes me as just, Hendriks being somebody who always wants the ball and is, all about grit and determination when it comes to his attitude on the mound. And perhaps like his body just, this is the one time his body failed him when, up until this point it hadn't. And perhaps like just because of everything he'd been through, he just maybe couldn't recognize this kind of arm discomfort versus normal building up arm discomfort, normal pitching with the partially torn UCL arm discomfort.
Again, another good comment from Ezra Rec in the YouTube comments. Though it's the kind of injury that's affecting the Rays and Dodgers these days, that it's happening to an incompetent organization isn't necessarily due to their incompetence. And like, I understand that point, but for me, the White Sox do not earn any benefit of the doubt when it comes to injury handling now, especially with the vast amount of examples we have seen the last couple of years, even this year, refusing to put guys on the injured list. Like, man, I thought you hired a guy, you hired a team to address this stuff, and someone has to be the adult in the room. Like, unfortunately, you have this very painful lesson moving forward, whoever is in charge, and hopefully you never have to go through this situation again. But and I'm glad you in your column brought up Garrett Crochet, because Garrett Crochet is not well, and he's coming off of Tommy John surgery. And there's always this idea that you go through Tommy John and you bounce right back and you're back to normal, or you could even throw harder. It's a routine surgery. It just doesn't seem like the rehabs have been routine for the White Sox. And it's just a concern. Like, it's another example that I am very concerned about the way that the White Sox are handling injuries. And now, lo and behold, even if this is, like, to your point, Jim, just bad luck all around, well, you don't have Liam Hendriks now for the 2014 season, and you have a very difficult financial decision to make. upcoming.
You've been told, right, that there's no
Yes.
insurance on this contract?
Yeah, there's no insurance on Hendriks' contract. Insurance on player contracts has skyrocketed from what I was told from a minority owner source of the Chicago White Sox, and you only get that type of insurance now for very large contracts, let's say more than $150 million. Like Shohei Ohtani's contract will have insurance on it because it's worth to get insurance on it. Liam Hendriks, 3 years, 50 some million dollars. No, you don't. It's the insurance is too much for those types of contracts. So for the White Sox, they have a difficult financial decision to make. For Hendriks, man, I feel for him as just a person to battle and to win against cancer and to survive that. And now you got to spend the next 12 to 14 months after surgery sitting, healing, rehabbing, and you've heard pitchers over the years say it's a very lonely process to rehab from Tommy John. Like, yeah, we're probably not going to see Liam Hendriks pitch again until 2025, and we're all going to be wondering what kind of shape Hendriks is in. 2, what team is he pitching for? Because it's probably not going to be the Chicago White Sox.
Yeah, it's I guess like 13 months if he split the difference, that puts him back in the mound in September. I'm guessing he would want to try to pitch in September just to prove himself to the market, unless like he and the White Sox agree to some kind of deal, or who knows what, maybe the White Sox, want to do, just make sure that, his time on the team doesn't end on that note. But I would assume if he can, like he'd want that September, with maybe one of the extra roster spots to show teams or show the White Sox that he's still got it.
Well, we are going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor. But coming up next, we'll talk about what happened on the field for the White Sox in Arlington, Texas, and preview the upcoming series against the Cleveland Guardians. The biggest acts are visiting Chicago this summer, on top of all the baseball games and other great concerts, theater shows too. It can be quite the chore and headache trying to secure tickets to all of these shows and events. Buying tickets shouldn't be stressful. Use Game Time to purchase your tickets. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for sports, music, comedy, theater near you. They've got killer deals on last-minute tickets, and their best price guarantee helps eliminate stressing over tickets. If you find tickets in the same section or even row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. That's why Game Time is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country. Download the Game Time app, create your account, and get $20 off your first purchase using our promo code SOXMACHINE. Terms and conditions apply. Again, create an account and use our promo code SOXMACHINE for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Game Time. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. And welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. The White Sox got swept in Texas. Not a very close series, I guess. If you just read the box scores, I mean, they lost the first game by 2 runs. They lost the third game by 2 runs. But in 27 innings against the Texas Rangers, the White Sox scored in 2 of them. And in the third game, they were up 3-0 in the top of the first inning against Max Scherzer. They scored 3 runs off of Max Scherzer, but that was it. They scored the rest of the game. And, Touki Toussaint, I thought pitched well against a very dangerous Texas offense, but the Rangers offense came back and they won 5-3. Dane Dunning and Andrew Heaney embarrassed the White Sox hitters. Both of them struck out more than 10 batters. Dane Dunning had a career high in strikeouts against his former team. And 4 runs scored in a 3-game sweep against the Texas Rangers. But Jim, don't worry about that, because the White Sox are building a culture. And I'm bringing this up because Seby Zavala had some really interesting comments after the game. Like, the White Sox need to focus, according to Seby Zavala, on trying to generate, positive moments, because if the losses pile up, things are going to go really sideways in the clubhouse. And this is, I know that you mentioned in our last episode, the White Sox wanting to protect Pedro Grifol. But this is something that I'm going to be paying attention to, and just how these players respond to Grifol for the rest of the season, and who actually buys into him as the manager.
Yeah, it's unique coming from Sebi just because he isn't the most rah-rah guy. Like
Right.
he often is very terse and blunt if there isn't anything good that can be said. So to hear him try to generate some positive, try to generate some good vibes after a terrible series, like struck me as like notable. One quote that jumped out to me during the whole trade sequence, John Greenberg highlighted in his post about just the White Sox trade deadline activity. It was a column about that in the Cubs. But he said the White Sox also made it easy on Hahn to sell with the way they played all season. The most interesting thing Hahn said Tuesday had to do with the team's culture, an amorphous word we use to talk about why a team is winning or losing. He definitely pointed some fingers, anonymously at least. Quote, there's been some disappointments along the way, too, in terms of how some people have behaved and acted and reacted to the adversity here, he said. And that factors in when you're trying to build a positive winning culture. And going forward, that's going to be part of the evaluation. Guys who have each other's backs, guys who work toward winning as a team, guys who put the team above personal interests, unquote. So seeing Sebi's quote, like, was he paying attention to what Hahn said? Or has this been a conversation going on about, like, having each other's backs and, like, not, grumbling or being unavailable or whatnot? But, yeah, that's I also stood out just because of that Joel Sherman report saying that the White Sox are interested in Salvador Perez and being like, is this going to be how it goes? Like the White Sox, just grumble about, the culture rather than the talent they have, or, who's actually been instilling the culture or who's up top. And like, this would be like the fourth time the culture's been bad under Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn.
Yup.
Their tenure. And they keep complaining about it. So like, yeah, sure. Of course, now they go Sal Perez to try to be Grifal's like ambassador of culture or whatnot. And then, is he going to be like the, this is like thinking 5 steps ahead, but I just picture like Perez being like treated as like a narc for Pedro Grifal and like nobody taking to him. And then that goes belly up, and the year is 2035 and Kenny Williams Jr., who is now in charge, with Kenny Williams still up top. Yeah. And the culture has gone south for like the 7th time under their just reign, I suppose. You can't even call it like a tenure. It's a reign at that point.
Trey Williams in the YouTube comment section. The White Sox have to finish 20-32 or better to not have 100 losses. I don't know what to tell you guys. I don't know if the White Sox are going to have 60 wins. Like the way they've been playing, like 60 and 102 or even worse than that. Is certainly possible. Eel Rig. How old is Brett Lowry? I'd say we bring him back in some bulldog. Even like who was some of the guys in the past, like in 2015, 2016? Well, 2015, the captains of attitude, Jeff Samardzija. Who was it? Brett Lowry that Rick Hahn brought in because he thought that the clubhouse needed some edge to it.
Yeah.
Was he the one, or was it like obviously Todd Frazier and Adam Eaton had a great working relationship?
They kind of built the team like a boy band. Like, this guy's our fiery guy. This guy's our sage leader. This guy, like
Adam LaRoche was that guy. We need leadership.
Yeah. Like, so, I mean, that's how they've always approached culture, is they like, this guy will solve it. Or, it goes back to just, probably when they're thinking about culture, like 5 managers in, and they still really haven't figured out how to do it. It's probably like the case of the tippy top of the organization, not setting the right, just example or making the right demands, or hiring people like who down the chain, implement standards. Like yeah.
Again, this is something we'll be paying attention to because it was pretty clear. Like, Robin Ventura was already in a losing battle going into the 2016 season. Props to him. He prevented a full-out mutiny in spring training.
What did Kenny Williams? That was another case where Kenny Williams came in.
Yeah, he had to step in because Jimmy Rollins had enough of Drake LaRoche running the bases. And, they just didn't respond to Robin at the end of that season. But that's the one thing, like, I thought that was a positive thing, though, during Rick Renteria's 10 years manager for the White Sox, especially those rebuilding years. They played hard for Rick Renteria. You could see that there was effort. And even the whole tagline, Ricky's boys don't quit. And you just saw the level of effort on the playing field under Renteria, even though they didn't have the talent, and those were some really bad teams. They still tried. Against Texas, after that first inning, it was like, hey, we scored 3 runs. That should be enough, right? Just dust your hands off.
I mean, like the
effort is lacking.
Yeah, but I mean, like the way this deadline went with 6 pitchers being sent out and 1 position player being sent out, like the pitching staff should be terrible. Like they should be like overexposed facing a team like Texas, and yet like, well, Dylan Cease is the one that gave way, of course. I mean, like, you know, the way they've pitched, like since all these trades, or as these trades are like picking out, you know, one veteran after another, like it still puts in stark relief, even starker relief, that it's still the offense. Like the offense is the reason why. I mean, like April was terrible for the pitching staff. Like the starting and the bullpen were both, you know, rotten, and like the bullpen, part of it was like Griffall learning how to navigate a leverage hierarchy that was upended with Hendriks being out, and trying to figure it out. Just happened to be like a tough schedule, and so many, you know, so few games of having like big leads to kind of iron some things out. Like he got thrown in the fire, it didn't work out. But I mean, like ever since April, like the pitching's been fine, not great, but fine. It's just the offense has not done anything. Like not even like I always remember like the pre World Series teams of the aughts, where just like they'd score 14 runs in one game and 1 run in the next game. And like, oh, I wish they were more consistent. Like the White Sox offense is consistent. That's why I never use the word consistent as a standalone adjective, because they're, always need to be more consistent. Like, no, they're very consistent. They're just bad.
Consistently bad.
Yeah. Like teams that are consistent and good are elite. Like, most teams that are ordinarily good are inconsistent, but that means like they have some upside that they can occasionally tap into. Like this White Sox offense really does not have that upside. And that's why I thought like trading Jake Berger, as hard as it is, like he's the one guy actually playing well enough to be traded. And so like, at least they're trying to do a 3-point turn out of their current roster dead ends, where like they just have so much personnel space tied up in guys who can't really play positions all that well. So like this is where they found themselves. But yeah, just everything kind of circles back to, man, how do these guys still have jobs?
That's like there's an entire episode.
Multiple culture crises, multiple managers not being able to reach, like, multiple cases of like, rosters not meshing together, just multiple cases of injuries not being heeded.
Yep.
It's baffling. I mean, it's not baffling because we're clearly understand. I want to be baffled. I think that's I think what's toughest about following this team is like,
nothing is surprising.
Nothing is surprising. It's just like, I want to learn a new front office. I want to learn their habits, what they do, what their words mean, what their words don't mean, etc. Like when it comes to this front, like I know everything, and there's nothing like everybody knows everything because like they've been here forever. So it's not like right. I've solved the riddles. And so like, I have the key to knowledge of this whole thing. No, like we've all been around and watched this enough to like know what they do, know what their blind spots are, know what rakes they always step on. And like, it'd just be nice to have somebody else just to change the conversation so we can at least either give some benefit of the doubt, or not even benefit of the doubt, but just like, we don't know what this means. We're all in a learning period here to get to know each other.
Well, I know how to fix your offense, and I know how to fix your culture problem, Jim. Salvador Perez, baby. Yep. He's going to fix both of them. December 8th, 2000. Well, I did say December 8th, 2023. I want to bump that to December 5th, 2023. The White Sox trade for Salvador Perez. As Jim and I
December 7th. A date that will live in infamy.
As Jim and I will be in Nashville for the winter meetings. This would be the White Sox big winter meetings move. They acquire Salvador Perez by trading Jake Eater. I'm kidding.
Well, I remember like when the year I went to the winter meetings, I was surprised by like how just little yeah, like it feels like there should be like a horn or a town crier saying when a move's been struck, because it's just there's no way to know unless you're on Twitter, like staring at your phone. I think if they traded for Salvador Perez and we were there, I think everybody would know.
We just laughed. What are these jabronis laughing at? Oh man. Can't wait when Salvador Perez becomes a White Sox. That's totally happening this offseason. All right, and we'll end this show, wrap it up with the series preview, as the Chicago White Sox will be playing the Cleveland Guardians. And this may be a shocker to you. The White Sox lead the season series. They have won 6 out of 10 games against the Guardians. They're 6-4, and this will be the last time the White Sox and Guardians play in 2023. So at the beginning of the year, we kind of circled this series as a pretty critical series for the Chicago White Sox, but obviously that is not going to be the case. And just looking at the American League Central standings before we get to the pitching problems for the White Sox, again, Cleveland sold. Is that accurate, Jim? Can we say that they were sellers at the deadline?
Yeah, like light sellers. There seem more of like a 2024 move than a 2023 move.
Yeah, like not a lot of confidence to build up the team that they know they're not going to probably be doing too much damage in the postseason, or they just don't have a lot of confidence in catching the Minnesota Twins. But the Twins didn't do a single thing at the deadline, and it's just kind of funny reading the other American League Central recaps at the trade deadline. No one is happy with the front offices of the teams in the American League Central after the trade deadline, especially in Minneapolis.
I mean, like the White Sox might be the happiest fan base.
About what happened at the trade deadline, you're probably right, Jim.
Because Eduardo Rodriguez, I think, Tigers fans were disappointed by that. I mean, like Rodriguez had the right to leverage his no trade clause and just happened to be a case of like, oh, yeah, I mean, you gave it to him. He used it. Although that was the previous administration giving Rodriguez that no trade clause, and maybe the new front office, Scott Harris, did not know. That's another GM who, like, if he were talking to Kenny Williams, would be like, huh, why is he talking to Kenny? Versus maybe Al Avila goes back with Kenny, but Rick Hahn should be like a Scott Harris peer. I mean, like White Sox, the only ones who did anything kind of pertinent to their standings. Like the Royals are quiet, Tigers got shut down, like Twins did not. Like nobody wants this division. It's amazing. Like, yeah, just and like with this series coming up, like it doesn't surprise me that the White Sox are leading the season series, if only because like Cleveland can't escape 500. Like even when the White Sox were selling off their pitching staff while the Cleveland was there, like still could only split the series.
Yeah, the Twins still lead. They're 55-54. As we are streaming this episode, they are playing against the St. Louis Cardinals. The Guardians, though, even though they're 53-56, are just 2 games back of the Minnesota Twins. They're still in it, whether they want to be or not. They're in it. And Detroit Tigers at 48-60, 6.5 games back, and the White Sox are 43-67. I can't believe they're 6 games back at Detroit in the standings. Look out for Kansas City. They've won 6 straight games. They're 35-75 on the season. And the pitching probables for this series: Friday night, it's Mike Clevinger in his old stomping grounds in Cleveland. Saturday night, it's Michael Kopech. And Sunday, it's a game that will be on NBC's Peacock channel, so you have to have that app, as the game will be at 11:05 a.m. Central Time. Super early game between the White Sox and the Guardians, as Jesse Schultens is currently the probable starter for the White Sox. So Clevinger, Kopech, and Schultens for the White Sox. And I think in these series, especially we got Kopech and Schultens going back to back, like Clevinger, whatever, I don't care. But Kopech and Schultens, we still need to learn more, and we need to see progress from them, and they're going to be contributors for the 2024 White Sox team. Even though the White Sox got swept, Schultens pitched really well in that first game, even though the White Sox lost 2-0 against, again, a very good Texas lineup, Jim. And I've been wondering this for a bit because I know he's an Ethan Katz guy, but does Jesse Schultens have staying power here?
I'm inclined to say no, but not like I would say he doesn't have like long-term staying power. I think through the rest of the year, like he and Tukey Tucson are like they're fine. They're competing. I just don't exactly know what like his go-to pitch is. Like Schulten's is kind of like a pitchability guy, which is good. Like, and I think I think he's an interesting presence on this rotation, just as like a foil to Kopech, like who just can't quite iron it out. And I know like after his last start, like he's trying to talk about like mindset and being positive and keeping his focus and everything like that. But like when it comes to like if Schulten's comes up and 29-year-old rookie and just out pitches Kopech down the stretch, like that's gotta. I wonder if that like affects a few people, like whether it's like Kopech himself being like, how come he can do this and I can't? Or the White Sox saying like, he can't do this. And if Schulten's is providing this kind of base level of like major league replacement level starting pitching and giving you like a Mario Kart ghost racer of like, here's how a pitcher should be performing if you are just an adequate like fifth starter, and like Kopech isn't meeting that level of standards, like I could see them, having that conversation over the winter, like, giving them a to-do list or just saying like, we're going to the bullpen, or as soon as like these AA guys want, whether it's, Eater or Nastrini or somebody, Kai Bush, like saying like, once, these guys start panning out, like, we're going to relegate you to the bullpen because this isn't working. Like, that's what I think is the most interesting thing about Schulten's is just how well he's pitching despite like not having a whole lot. Like his fastball, it seems like it's ticking up a little bit, like 95 when it was like 93, 94 before. So it seems like he's reaching back a little bit more and finding a little bit more on it, but still not getting swings and misses, not really a ground ball guy, just off balance and kind of has a plan that he can stick to. I think my concern with Schulten's is like, should he have to go into all his pitches the first time through? What does he have the second time through? And I think that always concerns me about somebody like Schulten's. When you look at his pitch mix, it's like, oh, his fastball first the first time through. Then he's mixing his slider more, with the first pitch the second time through. And then here comes a curveball the third time around. Like that works well until all of a sudden, like you run into a crooked number early and you have to like just go into the emergency supply of your entire game plan. And then like, it's really hard to get through a lineup a second or third time. So that's, I think, what I'm watching for Schulten's as he goes, but watching Cleveland's offense, like that's not necessarily doing anything to press pitchers into their desperation mode.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Kopech had one of his best starts this season against Cleveland earlier this year. So hopefully he could find some magic. But with Schulten's, what's that Simpsons word? Cromulent?
Yeah.
Schulten's is cromulent for the rest of this season. But it does raise some questions going to next season. Like, if he's a 5-inning guy, that's fine if that's in the back of your rotation. But Kopech's probably a 5-inning guy. Tucson is probably a 5-inning guy. Schulten's is probably a 5-inning guy. Cease is probably at most a 6-inning guy. So when you're looking to construct your bullpen in 2024, you may want to add some guys that can be swing guys that can take on a couple of innings here and there, because you don't have a starting rotation as far as the outlook going to next season that could go deep into games, and whoever you get in free agency or trade to help round out the starting rotation. I think durability is going to be a key factor for the White Sox and who they try to add as far as on the cheapish, because starting pitchers are not cheap. In free agency, Mike Clevenger did not have that durability when they signed him, so that's why we had the outcry back in November that we are questioning that signing for the White Sox.
That preceded everything else.
Yeah, preceded everything else. And Clevenger, I'm sure, watch him go 6 innings, strike out 7, and it's all scoreless. And everyone would be like, hey, Mike Clevenger had a great outing. Fantastic. That's good for him, because that's what he's pitching for right now. Mm-hmm. He's pitching for him to look better because it's a mutual option. And if he pitches better and his agent says, I think I can get you a multi-year deal, he's gone. The White Sox don't even get that opportunity to even opt in. Clevenger could just opt out and he's gone. So Mike Clevenger is pitching for himself at this moment. Schultz and Kopech are trying to prove that they have staying power in the starting rotation. So that's what's worthwhile in watching this series. And again, the White Sox just need to win one game to win the season series against Cleveland, which would be really odd for this season. But that's what I'm going to be watching for, is how Schultz and Kopech pitch, Jim. Anything else that you're going to be keeping an eye on?
No, I mean, just the offense in general as a unit, like seeing if there's any
do
light
something.
There. Yeah, basically the stick poking meme. I mean, that's kind of how it is. Like, just, Oscar Colas, watching him, like there's a reason to watch like several players on this roster, but like none of it's for good reasons. And it's not exciting, just more along the lines of like, can the White Sox actually build around these guys if they are treating 2024 as a true contention year, or at least, giving them a shot at contending with other moves they make. Like right now, there's just nobody providing that kind of upside to where this is going to be Jimenez's breakout year. This is going to be Andrew Vaughn's breakout year that, cement them into the middle of the order, and, everybody's gonna be happy with the way they look. It's pretty bleak. And I think seeing the pitching step up and the C start aside, pitching winnable ball games, at least that makes it watchable. That's, I think, what it gets really tough is when they fall behind 6-0, after 2 innings, and all of a sudden you're looking at the clock and saying I got 2 more hours of this, and I got the front end of the bullpen. So I mean, this. So I think if you're gonna watch a terrible team mailed in down the stretch, if the pitching is invested and the pitching is all the reasons to still show up and perform, at least that makes it more palatable, and the games are closer to 2 hours than 3 hours.
Yeah, cap tip to the pitching staff. They are pitching admirably, and we'll see if the offense does pick up their play this weekend against Cleveland. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine Podcast. Thank you guys so much for watching the live stream on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine, which if you just found the YouTube channel, which I recently just saw as a comment section that someone was shocked that Sox Machine has a YouTube channel. If you are shocked as well, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you'll get our latest videos and notifications of our latest streams. And you can follow us on social media. We're at Sox Machine for Twitter or X or whatever they're going to call it next week, Instagram and Threads. You can follow me on Twitter and on those platforms at SoxMachine_Josh. We always take the audio of the Sox Machine live episodes and upload it into our podcast feed, which you can subscribe to on platforms such as Spotify and Apple Music. If you enjoy our work and want more, you can get more by becoming a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/SoxMachine, where our Patreon supporters get exclusive content, ad-free versions of both the podcast and website. And when we have new Sox Machine swag, like the I Heart Wild Pitch Offense shirts that you can get at the Sox Machine shop, the Patreon supporters are the first ones to receive it. Monthly plans start at $2, or you can save with an annual subscription. Again, sign up at patreon.com/SoxMachine. Sox Machine Live is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for watching and listening.